Hi everyone, I'm Anthony O'Flynn. Trust you're all well. Haven't made a video for a while. I've been busy with a number of different projects, including doing some renovations at my house, which soon to be completed. And when that's done, I'll be actually having some one-day workshops here on the Sunshine Coast. Just a one-day workshop, so stay tuned for those. And this video, I'll be addressing the state of the Australian collective soul, the national soul, the egregore. Egregore is a Greek word. I actually go into detail of what actually an egregore is in a previous video, which I'll see if I can link to in this video, put a link for that, because that would be a better introduction than this video to really understand the esoteric concept of egregore and the collective national soul. And as I've stated previously, this is relative for sporting organizations, for corporations, for states, for cities. Anywhere where there's a collective, there's like a group soul, a collective soul. And of course, the more the number of people, the bigger the soul. And I'll be discussing this state of the Australian collective soul here in this video, the current state of it, which in one word can be summed up as confusion. This isn't something that's just developed over the last week or month. It's actually been ongoing for, well, since last year actually. And this confusion, which I'll expand on, is really related to the beginning of a collective shift in consciousness, which, as it's manifesting in our world at this time, it starts with confusion, because we're living in such a state of deep hypnosis, of deep indoctrination, that to pull anyone out of that at what I call the lower levels of the awakening, not the spiritual dimension, which ultimately is the most important, requires a certain process which involves this state of confusion, which is characterized by uncertainty, doubt, and at the root of it is fear. So the Australian collective soul, although it is changing for the better, it's characterized at the moment by confusion, which at first glance might seem negative. But beyond the confusion, then we can move into the other stages of the awakening, which actually include anger, which may seem counterproductive or not an awakened state at all at a certain level, which, yes, I agree with that statement. But the anger is a reflection of the frustration, particularly characterized in the segment of the egregore, which is the awakening community, which I would say in Australia at different levels along that journey is somewhere around 10% of the population. It could be more, it could be less. I haven't really thought about it in terms of numbers. It's just come into my mind then to give you an overview of how I see things. It's very, very small. And of that 10%, the spiritual dimension probably comprises less than 0.5% at this point. Although people are starting to engage that process, but this is like a subset or a subsection of the total collective. So why is the confusion necessary? Well, you're basically taking people who have lived in like a situation, something similar to the Truman Show, where they've been force-fed this diet of lies, manipulation, indoctrination, and fundamentally inversion. So everything in this reality is inverted. Even spiritual principles and concepts and so-called gurus are inverted, and it's to be expected in this age of Kali Yuga. But the inversion means that people do not see reality for what it is. They actually mistake good for evil, and they are unable to have this discernment as to what's occurring. If you don't have the eyes to see, and this blindfold is slowly fading or being taken away, and you can see partially or a little bit, or you can see shapes and things as a metaphor, then you don't go from basically living in the Truman Show to understanding that you're living in this inverted reality, the Matrix, whatever name you want to give to it, in one news article, one podcast, one video, one meme. For most people in the collective, and I'm speaking very broadly now, I'm speaking about the entire collective of Australia. And of course, with that, you've got people who are having all different types of backgrounds from various countries, from various belief systems, various occupations, various life experiences. So you can't like basically just expect the egregore to shift suddenly, as many people are. And it should be shifting faster really than what it is, but should be is kind of like a reflection of my preference or my desire, which is not the preference of perhaps the other 25, 26 million people in this country. And that's something to always take into account when you consider the collective, particularly if you're watching this video, because, you know, I don't expect most people who even understand what's going on this planet to be watching this video at all. Really, I don't. But my point is, be careful that you're living in an echo chamber, which we all do to a degree, that the way we see the world and others around us is perhaps shaping the collective more than what we would actually, more than the truth. So this echo chamber, which is actually one of the fundamental programs of the algorithms and so on social media, is to keep you in your echo chamber, and it's to keep other people in the echo chamber so they can continue to believe all these safe and effective lies and all this sort of thing, and believe the mainstream media and so on. So coming back to the point of confusion, the confusion is really it's the first stage of waking from this deep hypnosis, this deep slumber. And the confusion is expressed as what, as an example? I'm not quite sure the mainstream media are telling the truth about this. I think this politician might be lying to me. I'm not sure if this digital ID bill is for the greater good. What about the propaganda about masks? What about, and the confusion lies because there is not one focus on one group and not focus on another group, in the sense that there is like a bridge, and the confusion is part of this. And it means that the Australian egregore is very confused for many good reasons. One, if you are like basically the silent generation is mostly past now, there's still some very small numbers of the silent generation left. The boomers will pass in the next 15 to 20 years or so, even less for some of them. So really in the next sort of about 10 years, you're really going to have people who are really on this planet, which were born for say around, 1960 onwards, 60, 84. Yeah, even less than that. It's not important, but they haven't experienced some great tumultuous episode that have been experienced in many other cultures, like full-blown communism. We already have socialism in this country in Australia, but no one really wants to talk about it. We are a socialist country, just not in name. Like an invasion from a foreign invader, like a really big, like proper depression, like 1929. Some sort of huge tumultuous natural disaster. I mean, colossal. Some grave illness or something like this, like a plague type thing. We haven't really had that. Okay, you can argue we've had the Vietnam War. We participated obviously in all the wars, including the ones in campaigns in Afghanistan and Iraq and so on. But it's not the same as if you're in Iraq, is it? And your house is getting bombed. It's not the same as if you're in Gaza. It's not the same as if you've been in hyperinflation. And so this qualities of naivety in the Australian egregore is very, very, very clear. We are an extremely naive population. We have not gone through this rite of passage at all. And this means basically that we are very innocent. And you can say that innocence is a really beautiful part of our culture. And I think for me, growing up in the 1970s and the 80s, that was really characterised by this kind of equality, egalitarianism, opportunity, and high standard of living. We had one of the highest standard of livings in the world. And the lucky country, the phrase the lucky country was actually a book written by Donald Horne in 1964. And he basically referred to it as Australia is a lucky country run by second-rate people who share its luck. And he meant that as in actually a criticism of Australia, that we haven't really done anything to deserve the fruits that we've gained, at least economically, from living here. It's just been by sheer luck. And he also stated that Australia showed less enterprise than almost any other prosperous industrial society. And this is going back to the 60s. So imagine where we're at now. In our business model or economic structure here in Australia actually represents a third world country. It's just that the effects of that are only really starting to begin now, which is all a source of this confusion and this basic challenging situation that is now starting to be created by design. This is all clearly part of the globalist agenda to firstly create housing crisis, excessive migration, not the necessary resources and housing for the migrants to increase rates and also costs of housing, while at the same time selling off housing to foreign owners who are not required to live in the property or actually even rent it. So we have a shortage of housing. In fact, the number of homes in Queensland last year actually that got built declined at a time when we need them to rise. And so we are faced with a tsunami of problems, and that's why if you go back and watch my earlier video in the start of the year for my annual forecast, you can see that I titled The Year of Convergence, and it's really starting to become evident already, and we're only in the sort of middle of May, that we are entering a time of converging problems by design. Not all of them, but nearly all of them, particularly the economic ones and some of the social ones. The political ones were actually baked in the cake from the conception of the political system, such as the preferential voting system and so on. So this means that this naivety means that we have, particularly the younger generation, the millennials, Gen Z and so on, haven't lived through a tumultuous period collectively where we are actually gone through this rite of passage into adulthood. This is going to be one of the key components of the whole shift in consciousness as it affects Australia as an egregore. I should just make a caveat that how you experience this will be completely 100% dependent on your own individual karma, your own individual level of consciousness and the evolutionary lessons you've chosen to experience through the evolution of your soul. So the confusion is basically an effect of that is the diminishing the trust of the mainstream media, diminishes the trust in the government at even state and local level, and also the uncertainty around everything that we've taken for granted. And a reflection of that is, of course, the incredible entitlement we have in Australia. I really look at entitlement as a substitute word for self-centeredness and egotistical way of being, because it really is a reflection of what we are receiving, what we are getting, what we are gaining, and never our responsibility, our duty, our obligation. How can we give back? How can we do something to support the collective? And because we have become so entitled, people don't like the word selfish, but that's what it really means. At least an aspect of that word, that we're going to get extremely strong lessons collectively to move through this shift as a rite of passage to move into adulthood. And it's necessary at a collective level. It's not necessary at an individual level. Perhaps many people who are watching this video won't be affected at all in the same way as much of the collective will. In fact, one of the key goals of the awakening is to stay above the consciousness of the collective, because it is so dysfunctional. And we're seeing it become increasingly dysfunctional. And this state of confusion, to be clear, is not only limited to the Australian soul. It's actually been experienced by most Western nations, Western Europe, North American countries that have previously enjoyed a very high standard of living. The manufactured expansion of the money supply to create inflation and therefore reduce purchasing power is one of the key themes that is emerging in 2024. It's been around for quite a while, but people are only starting to realise, a bit like the frog in the pot, the boiling pot. So This is a phenomenon actually on both. I'm not on TikTok, but I see people who take TikTok videos and put it on Twitter. Twitter, especially at least where I see it, of young people under the age of 40 sitting in their car making a video about how expensive everything is in their country, particularly USA, and in my view, it's mostly Liberal Democrat voters. And you are going to see, I won't deviate too much of this topic, but you're going to see this start to take off, perhaps not the videos per se, but the state of mind around the economic situation in Australia radically this year. And this moves on to the next phase of the collective soul, which is been experienced by quite a significant number of people now, which is anger. This anger is an effect of basically being deprived of material resources. It's an effect of the inflation, diminished purchasing power, and just an overall distress at just how little resources most people have week to week to live on. I'm not saying people shouldn't be complaining about it. It's a terrible thing, but this is a key ingredient of the awakening, is to actually move through the stage of denial where most people are, and how we are basically now looking at this from a point of view of the split in consciousness which is occurring, which is all part of this, that people are unhappy about. We're living in a polarized society these days. We'll get used to it because it's only going to become more polarized, but it doesn't mean there needs to be conflict. You don't need to be around the people who are perhaps not on this journey of awakening or interact with them at all. And you'll see, it's already started years ago, but that people are just fading out of your life. People are ghosting you. People are just not connecting with you anymore. People are, people who might have been in your life for decades, whatever. It can be anyone, work colleagues, friends, family, whatever. That's part of the splitting consciousness, and there's no point fighting it, because this is part of the awakening. But the collective now moving into a state of anger, not that the anger is a healthy expression, but I'm looking at it positively from the point of view that people are now starting to question the narrative, to challenge the status quo, and are starting to actually see things more clearly for what they are, which is, in the long term, is very healthy. Now, there are also going to be a group of people who are going to double down on their belief system. And we've seen now the state of masculinity in Australia is, well, it's a sore and sorry state, actually. And on many different levels, whether you look at the mental health crisis, the number of men suiciding in Australia every day is increasing. And it's also this emasculated, weak culture that characterises Australian men today. I mean, Australians have this belief that we're this renegade, anti-authoritarian, a little bit reckless type psyche. That's a total myth. And you only have to look at the events of the 2020 and beyond to see how indoctrinated, how meek, and how willing to conform to authoritarian and government overreach that Australians really are. And and people would perhaps classify this in the patriarchy, a reflection of the patriarchy. Well, that's not true at all, because we've had our fair share of women leaders as well, who even in the events of 2020 contributed substantially to this authoritarianism, this government overreach, this blatant tyranny, and just throwing the constitution by the wayside to enforce these tyrannical and authoritarian agenda. I mean, you don't have to look as far as Anastasia Palaszczuk, Gladys Berejiklian, previous Prime Minister, of course, Julia Gillard, previous Premier in Queensland, Anna Bligh, even Joan Kerner in Victoria was a woman Premier. So to blame it all on the patriarchy is extremely superficial, and it's not really looking into things properly. But it's also a reflection of the idea that the leaders in this country are very extremely easy to manipulate, and are just doing exactly what they're told to do by their globalist masters. It doesn't matter who they are, it doesn't matter what party they are, whether they're on the left wing, the right wing, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if they're man or woman. So we need to sort of get clear on this idea of the attempts by people like Albanese to create further division in our society based on gender as just being part of the plan to create further division and do anything but unify us under one umbrella for a greater country, a more country with good government, with accountability. And on that, you can see this meekness in Australia with the revelations that have just come out with the magic potion by Astra, where it's now been taken off the market. And Daniel Andrews, the Curse of Victoria himself, said that 2.6 million doses of the Astra magic potion were administered in Victoria. He said it is safe, it is effective. Where's the accountability? Where's the outrage? That means that there's basically 2.6 million doses being administered in one state alone here in Australia. Where are the men to protect their families, and where were they during this time? And what about speaking out now? Meaning perhaps you've unwillingly poisoned your own family, yourself. God knows what's going to happen with the health of these people going forward. And yet the people who were trying to speak out and warn people about this were ridiculed, ostracised, cancelled. Okay, I just had a technical issue I had to fix, so my apologies for that. And basically, that's the consequences of what occurred. And here we are now with this admission, and yet there's still no accountability. And there's still no genuine inquiry. People are calling for a royal commission. That's just ridiculous. That's not going to achieve anything. No one has been arrested. There have been all kinds of abuses of the Constitution, abuses of human rights. People have been lost their jobs, their homes, their incomes, their relationship even, and been ostracised from many friends and family. And this is part of the collective turmoil that unfortunately will be required for those souls who are actually going to embark on this awakening process to start to see the lies that they've been living. And I'm not talking about the people who have been speaking out now, I'm talking about the people who have believed all these ongoing lies. There's just one example of the level of indoctrination. There are hundreds actually, or many different events and belief systems that are completely inverted. And one of the big ones is basically believing the lies that you see on the television, and the people with these forked tongues, these politicians speaking these lies. And this will be the one of the big levels, of the lower levels of the awakening, one of the big things to actually come to terms with and let go of the denial. And there are still people in the egregore, there's a certain segment that is ashamed of their behaviour. You know, that they called the police and told them their neighbours had friends over, or they were like, Australians turned out to be a nation of dobbers, dobbing on your neighbour, which, before this all happened, people would have said, no, Australians are not like that. Well, this is this kind of shadow that we have in Australia that is very unexamined and we're very unaware of. We're very good at poking fun at other cultures and so on, but we're actually not really very aware of our own collective shadow. And this is part of the illumination process. I personally don't have a problem with it. I expect this to be ongoing over the next decades. But the real issue is the state of the collective in here in Australia, and what are we going to choose, basically. And finally, the last point I want to make is that in terms of the shadow, is that at a very deep esoteric level, the leader represents the consciousness of the collective. Now, this is something that most people will immediately knee-jerk deny, that they don't have any connection to Albanese or Morrison or Abbott or Gillard or Rudd or Howard or any of these people. But there's something in the collective psyche that allows this person to get to the place of basically governing, ruling, being in a position of very big influence, and we allow it collectively. Perhaps not you or me, but we allow it. And that's something to be really considered, because The leader represents the collective, even if we don't want to admit it, don't want to look into it, don't want to see it for what it is. And that's what the shadow is. That's what the collective shadow here in Australia is. And so we think about what qualities does this guy Albanese have? Well, the guy is a complete clown. I mean, he's so far from a statesman or a leader that it is difficult to actually understand how we actually managed to become Prime Minister of Australia. It really is. But you can like kind of talk about it's the mechanics of the party system, and it's really a matter of, bending the knee to the right people at the right time. It's all of that. But something still happens. However, the silver lining is that the primary vote for the Labor Party was so low. It was like 32% approximately, if I recall, that he hasn't got a real proper endorsement from the collective. And I'm of the firm view there's absolutely no way that he's going to win the next election, even with the support of the Greens and the Teals. There's just no way. So, but going back to this thing of where we transform individually is if we characterise Albanese as a weak man. He's easy to manipulate. He's doing what the globalist masters tell him. He's very easy to control. He's very easy to rule over. He's ultimately a puppet. And we project all of those qualities onto him that we are claiming is his. Well, the real point of growth, as far as this collective shadow really requires of us, is that where are we weak? Where are we easy to manipulate? Where are we easy to control? Where are we bending the knee to authoritarianism as a massive collective? And these are powerful questions to consider, because we can't really move forward until we actually address this, and we're like this ourselves. And this goes back to the Australian egregore and the myth of this. We were once like the Anzacs. We once had this true courage and this mateship and this loyalty and this acts of service to our nation because we believed in Australia. Obviously, many people don't believe in Australia the way they did now, who are on the journey of awakening. But where are we today? We're just a nation of people who are into negative gearing, talking about property, trying to accumulate material resources, get ahead and so on, without any real values or principles to leave behind as a legacy for future generations. And that is something I believe will change as we go through this process. But not until we start to contemplate these things at a much deeper, more spiritual level of how we are as a people, how we interact together as a people, and our individual role in how are we serving the collective. And these qualities, this projection, it's a Jungian concept, onto the leader, well, it really is a reflection of the collective consciousness at this time. We're very good at laughing at Biden in the US and some of the other leaders around the world, but we need to tend to our own garden. And this is where the illumination occurs. This is where the real awakening starts to occur. This is where there is this genuine growth and this genuine transformation. There's a lot to take in this video, but there's plenty more to come. Thanks for watching. Enjoy your weekend. We live in epic times.